And hello again, folks. Welcome to another edition of Alpharetta Tech Talk. I'm John Ray, and we are coming to you from the Business Radio X studio inside Renaissance Bank in beautiful Alpharetta. Folks, I want to welcome a great guest, old friend Brock Kolls. He's with Gr8BigIdeas. He's the founder and chief innovation officer with Gr8BigIdeas. Brock, welcome.
How are you? It's good to be here again.
It's great to have you back. Yeah. And
are we considered longtime friends now? We've known each other a long time in the community.
I know. we have, and you're always awesome to talk to. So I could trip out and we could have a long show, but we'll try to jam as much in as we can here. But for those that don't know you, give a little introduction, tell them about you and a little bit about your background and what you're up to at Gr8BigIdeas.
Correct. Well, I've always just been an entrepreneur. I got very lucky with a startup in the late 90s, early 2000s called USA Technologies, a wireless, cashless technology. We started with couple people, turned it into a penny stock, turned it into a couple dollar stock, and got it onto NASDAQ. If you use a vending machine these days with a credit card, that's where the technology landed. And so along the way, I met Coca-Cola and came down to Atlanta to work on a lot of really great innovations, freestyle, plant bottle, aluminum packaging, and that type of thing.
And for folks that don't know, the freestyle machine is the one that they see in all the
the touch screen. Yeah, you can't miss it.
Where you can get 180 zillion flavors, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Hey, awesome story is when I showed up there, they had 44 boxes, which were about 1 cubic foot of syrup piled up on the wall, and they said our design goal was to take 44 cubic feet of liquid and put it into 44 cubic inches of space. And so.
That's 80 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack, right?
That's exactly it. And a lot of weird things happen, right? When you go through the things. But I mean, that was the vision, right? And that was the goal. And it was an awesome team. And the product is tremendous. Right?
Yeah, it is.
So
it is.
I worked in that role for a couple of years at Coke, and then I started an open innovation program for them. And that allowed me to travel around the world, work with other entrepreneurs and startups. We really got good at working with companies, understanding the business needs they had, translating those business needs into innovation challenges, and then sourcing solutions in the tech community. And so it took about 5 years of pounding sand to try to figure out how to do that in a big company. Mm-hmm. But we had 3 or 4 years of tremendous growth, and the program is still going today at Coke. We ended up setting up 9 hubs, and for every 6 technologies we looked at, we commercialized one, which was a phenomenal statistic for a big company.
Yeah.
We worked in a lot of really critical areas of water and products, ingredients, and that type of thing. So in 2015, I left Coke. I felt like I might be doing the right thing, but in the wrong place, that there were a lot of corporates that were going through the same journey that Coke was, wanting to explore how to use the tech community and how to bring business problems that can be turned into innovation challenges that companies and researchers and that could work on. So I built a network. And I've been here in Alpharetta for a long time, mm-hmm. And live here.
Sure.
Now I just sort of bounce from corporates to corporates. I work out of the innovation labs here. They show up at a regular clip with different types of innovation challenges. I like to think I'm a brand ambassador for them, a connector in the community. I have my own skills as an entrepreneur that I can go into their companies and help them work through and solve business problems. And I have a background with intellectual property, so I can help both sides, both the startup and the corporates, protect those ideas. And so my wife still doesn't know what I do for a living. And we're coming up on our 25th anniversary. It's funny. I go to places and she'll say to me, hey, what's your husband do? And she just sort of pauses for a second and she'll say, well, why don't you just tell them what you do,
Well, you know what? That's okay. You're on a journey, right?
I'm on a journey.
Yeah. We're all on a journey. Now, Brock, you're really passionate about injecting innovation into corporations. And we talked a little bit as we were getting ready for the show here about all the issues that are involved in that. Yeah. And there are a lot of issues involved in that. Talk about some of those.
Yeah. So So these big corporates are a beautiful thing, right?
Sure.
I mean, and they've, a lot of people work for them, and they make gigantic products, and their scale is enormous, and they're iconic, right? It's hard to imagine some of these big companies not existing, like Coca-Cola and that type of thing.
Right.
They tend to focus on protecting and defending their existing business model, and they hire lots of people to do it. Accountants and lawyers and, engineers.
Particularly the lawyers, right?
Correct. And to market their products. And so even in those big companies, innovation can be a foreign language to them. It was at Coke. You would go into a building and, people would say, well, why do we want to change, right? I mean, my metrics are to stay the same and to do those types of things. And so the benefits is that they have gigantic market access, right? And they have funds to spend on innovation when they can find the right problems to work on. And so a lot of times they just need somebody on the outside that could be a brand ambassador for them to help kind of guide them in the tech community and to facilitate those types of things. They want to be secretive about their problems, right? So taking the time to turn business problems into innovation challenges that are kind of anonymous and non-confidential is good. A lot of them don't necessarily want to work with startups because they can't envision how scale up would work. And so they need to make sure that you address on not only finding the solution, but when we find the solution, can we grow it, and how fast can we grow it, and can we generate revenue? And so all of those dynamics are happening, right, inside of those companies, and they're matrixed. So not all the different boxes in the matrix are on board at all the same times. And there's a lot of checks and balances and friction points between profit centers and cost centers, legal, I mean, you name it, right? So it's a little bit of, I guess, the first innovation might be getting an idea through the business, right?
So we talked about the confidentiality problem. But then there's also the, I guess you might call it the IBM or McKinsey problem, right? That folks, the big corporates, and people inside those companies don't want to sign on to something so radical, so innovative that it might cost them their job down the road at worst case scenario.
What's interesting about that is, and I've had this concept for a long time, I kind of call it above and below the brand. And you can take any company you want, take Coca-Cola because I was there, right? There are certain companies that they look at above the brand, meaning they look up to. And their executives get a lot of credit if they can work with an IBM, if they can work with McKinsey, right? Everybody recognizes those names and everything.
Sure.
The reality is that a lot of those companies are just as slow as they are and just take us, have the same types of hurdles and issues and everything. And so they're not fast. Can't work on stuff and get them done quick. Below the brand, right, are typically where the startups are. These are companies that would look up to Coca-Cola and everything, right? And in those scenarios, finding them and funding them and fostering them, you can get solutions in the marketplace really quick. And so it's tough to teach a company that they need a little bit of both, right? That if you want to deliver something now, you're going to have to work with some companies that are kind of light and nimble and go fast. And if you want to work with something that you could do later, then building those partnerships with the big companies is important. And so, but a lot of times the companies just focus on the big partnerships. And I think it takes them a long time to get any sort of innovation out of those relationships. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, I don't want to get too far into this show without the great story you were telling off the air, because sometimes big companies come along and they are looking for innovation, and then they have trouble getting people outside to pay attention. You've got a great story about that.
Yeah. So when I first came to Coke, we worked on the freestyle dispenser, right? You see in the quick serve restaurant. Awesome technology, right? I mean, I showed the boxes and everything, dozens and dozens of great ideas, 200 people, super smart. I mean, just inventing everything, right? That was on there. The company then decided they were going to move that project from corporate to North America for commercialization. And they took 199 of the people with them and left me behind. While I missed not working on that project, but they asked me to start an open innovation program.
Okay.
And I had a partner from a packaging group that was there. And he and I began the journey of what open innovation is. And so I Googled it. found that there was a book online from Dr. Henry Chesborough. He's a good friend now at UC Berkeley. Bought the book, read it, and I called him, right? And I said, Henry, how about coming and, giving your assessment of Coke, right? And he turned me down, hung up the phone, but then called me back.
He just hung up on you, huh?
He hung up. Yeah, he hung up. I told him that in his book he had picked all the easy examples. He had found Xerox and IBM and P&G and a lot of the companies that really had very innovative programs for a long time, right? And he used those as examples.
Oh, you got up in his grill then.
Got up in his grill. He did come. He did take a look, and this is maybe the funny part of the story that you were hinting at. It was Christmas time, and he was delivering his outcome. And a lot of people were gone at Coke. I felt by myself. My partner was off with a job interview, of all things. We're getting ready to start the this new adventure together, and I'm already thinking I might be one man down. And Henry called.
Yeah.
And it sounded like there was a gigantic party in the background, and I was saying, Henry, what's the answer? What's it going to be? He says, Brock, I don't have the time right now. Things are going on here. I hear, noises, music, and everything. He says, I don't think it's going to work. I says, what do you mean? He says, I don't think innovation is going to work at Coke right now. And I says, Henry, you got to be kidding me. I can't go back with those recommendations. He says, I'm going to tell you why. He says, companies have to have a certain amount of pain in the system, right? Stock price down, competitors, eating their lunch, that type of thing. And it just didn't exist at that time for Coke. And so I hung up the phone, little down, right? Here's the world-renowned expert telling you that it's going to be a little bit harder than you thought.
Sure.
Then my partner called. And he says, Brock, what did Henry say? And I said, man, Henry said, take the job.
So things were going too well at Coke for it really to work.
It took us 5 years.
Wow.
5 years of pounding the sand, try to figure out, how inside of a big company to identify the right problems to work on, how to convert those problems into something that we could share externally, how to look in the right places in order to bring ideas back into the company and everything. And so I think a lot of companies go through the journey, right? And this is where I feel like having moved from Coke and gone into the tech community myself with great big ideas to just focus on this particular aspect can really speed them up, right? There's no reason to go through those learnings. If somebody can help coach you through it, they become more viable to our tech community quicker with a little bit of help.
So companies generally need to be at a certain level of corporate desperation, I'll call it, with their backs against the wall, in order to take a dive into the innovation pool, as it were. Talk about some of the companies, and you don't have to mention them by name, of course, but you've worked with some companies in that state, and you've had some successes with them.
Correct. Yeah, I worked with a real large bank with a long history, and they were very concerned that they would wake up one day and a lot of these new technologies would have just passed them by.
Right.
And so, their business pressure they were feeling was, to stay relevant to the next generation of consumers. So they actually had started an enterprise patent office. What they were going to do was harvest ideas from across their entire enterprise, and they were going to convert those ideas into something that they could patent and build a portfolio of really forward-looking and novel ideas. And then over time, as they felt which ideas were really going to be marketable, they could then take those patents and implement those solutions. And so I think that was a great way for them to spend money and communicate internally the why they were spending it, and turn that intellectual property now into something that they can bring back into the tech community and begin to implement those ideas as they see fit in the business. It gives our entrepreneurs an opportunity to maybe work with a large bank, help bring an idea to life, run a solution, be part of something bigger. And so it was a great example, I think, of how they leveraged it.
Sure.
Another was a big insurance company. They have the problem of writing the checks when people make insurance claims, but they don't really feel like they control reducing the claims themselves. And so their version of innovation was to take the top 5 areas where they were writing the largest checks and to work with their top 5 clients in those areas on joint solutions. And so one was slip and fall in restaurants. And so they picked a client that was meaningful to them in that space, and we collaborated on articulating that challenge and finding solutions. Another one was reducing the amount of fires in buildings. And so they partnered with another company, client of theirs, who had lots of buildings, and made the challenge. And we were able to then go find solutions for that. And they went into water. They went into workplace safety and some of the others. And so here's another great example of 2 companies co-creating, right, which reduces the risk for them.
Sure.
And at the same time, it's very to see the business, right? The company provides a solution. Maybe their rates go down, then the insurance company can write fewer claims, and whatnot. So it's another great example, right, of how these companies can solve their own business problems, but leverage the tech community, to do it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Folks, if you just joined us, we're speaking with Brock Kolls, and he is the founder and chief innovation officer at Gr8BigIdeas. So corporate entities are engaged with the tech community in several different ways, a myriad of ways. What do you see that's effective, and what's really a kind of a waste of time?
So, I think almost all the companies want to come into the tech community at some level or another, right? There's just too much activity going on for them not to be curious. It usually takes a strong senior leader in place at the company to sort of give permission, if you will, or cast an umbrella over those executives and give them the ability to go and experiment. I think they all come into the community kind of in a learning phase. They want to maybe attend some events, and they want to begin to look and see what's going on, right? More curiosity than anything else. Internally, they're trying to figure out what innovation is and how it's going to work and how we rewire the organizations and that type of thing. About 85% of the companies get stuck in that spot, though. So they're not really of value to the tech community per se, right? We're not getting business needs from them, and they're not starting projects, but it's an important learning step to go through. And I think the role that the tech community can play in that is to provide activities that help move them along, right? About 15% of the companies can then get to a point where they can explore, and that is where they're maybe meeting a startup or giving a problem to solve or participating in some meaningful way. Internally, they've began to thought about how to budget and maybe how to bring a project into the company and that type of thing. About 15% of the companies get to that point on there, which is good. You can start to do things with them. Only about 5% really, I think, attain a level where they're proficient, right? Meaning that they can articulate a problem, they can go out as a challenge, they can find a solution, they know how to budget for it, they can assign executives, and they have some sort of metric that they measure. At Coke, for every 6 things we looked at, we commercialized one. And so it was a simple metric to say, and a lot of companies struggle, I think, to get to that point.
Sure. Let's switch gears just a second. I mean, and talk about from the startup point of view. Startups have this issue of trying to get in and work with corporations. They like to solve those problems, as you talk about. What are the big mistakes you see startups making in approaching corporate?
Yeah. So I tell people the hypothesis that you should start with a startup is they're probably working in the right area, but they're probably working on the wrong problem. And I think it's just business acumen, that if they don't have the industry experience, sometimes it's difficult for them to really understand, what the problem is to solve. On the corporate side, the corporates absolutely understand the business problem to solve. And the value proposition is if they can communicate that to a startup, then they're on track and then success can be there. But the startups have historically a very low probability of success, right? And I think it's the business acumen and working on the wrong problem that is really what holds them down. In the corporate environment, there's very intolerant of failure. And so if you pick your number, if it's 80% failure or 90% failure in their starting community, I think a lot of executives understand that they cannot inherit that in their company. And the objective then of the tech community is to find ways to raise the business acumen of the startups and reduce the risk for the corporates so they get to a point where it's a success for both.
Right. Comes together. So let's get specific about, you talked about some of your success stories at Gr8BigIdeas and what the folks you've been working with, but talk about the different ways that corporations can engage with you.
Correct.
And how that works.
Correct. So I've organized a collection of capabilities, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I pitch it as these are the things, if you're coming into the tech community, that you're going to need. The first thing that we do is we try to do a discovery and design with them, where we can maybe go to the company, spend a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and maybe as long as 5 weeks that it takes to understand what it is that their company does, what it is that their goals are, and then to try to figure out how the tech community can help them reach those goals. So we put together an innovation roadmap. Very simple, very clear, gives them step-by-steps that we can do, and it's a great step. Part of that is taking a look at patents and trends and helping them understand where their competitor are and where they can maybe help build a new competitive advantage. If they have an Amazon problem, say that, Amazon's come into their business and really disrupted them, as it has in logistics,
sure,
and that type of thing.
Of course.
The question is, how do we solve that problem? How do we do it with new technologies that we can own and that type of thing and whatnot? So that's part of this innovation roadmap, discovering what the problem is, designing a solution for it, really helping them understand how the tech community can do that. The second step is what I call bootstrap patenting. And it really has to do with two parts, right? Whether the idea originates from a startup or whether the idea is a concept that a corporate has, the goal is you need to protect it before you do anything. And a lot of times, even in corporates, the high cost of that patent protection is something that prevents it from happening. And so as a service, right, both to the startup or the corporate, right, we do that work for them. We write those applications and get them a patent pending status on their idea. In the corporate perspective, it actually then reduces it from, instead of you giving the idea to the tech community, you owning the idea and engaging the tech community to build it. And it's a big mind shift for corporates to be able to own the idea and then engage the tech community to develop the solution. And so I think it's real important. The third step then is finding talent. A lot of them do very innovative programs. I work with a healthcare company where they wanted to find talent around the world in different cities so that they could have tech scouts out there as well. So they hired 2 entrepreneurs in Tel Aviv, Berlin, and Madrid, and then once a quarter, in addition to them working on the technology for the company, once a quarter, they would have them do an innovation pitch, if you will, to their corporate executives about what was going on in the tech community. And so they hired them as interns, which is another great strategy that we try to help the companies do because those programs typically already exist inside companies. And so if you can bring your talent in as interns, it works really good. And so that type of coaching and that type of network to help them find and bring talent around a problem is another great, it's a great way to think about solution.
Now, here in Atlanta, we've got several innovation labs. And what kind of role do they play for corporates?
So the innovation labs here are awesome. I've been around the country, probably like you have, and some cities pop up a lab here and there. But we really have different types of DNA in our labs. I mean, some of them are very focused on startups. A lot of them are founded by successful entrepreneurs, and so they really bring a unique perspective. They're adjacent to universities downtown, so you get this great cross-pollination between young minds and the labs and everything. They can help the corporates in a lot of different ways. One is in knowing that all the corporates are new to this when they first start, providing these recurring events that come up where corporates can come and they can learn about how companies or interfacing with the tech communities is a great way for them to get started. A lot of the companies that I work with, they want to have space. They want to be able to come and do offsite meetings in the labs, right? This makes them feel innovative. It gets them out of their four walls. It gives the the leadership teams an opportunity to look forward to their once-a-month meeting offsite and that type of thing, which is a great way to do that. The other is a lot of them might want a workshop. They all do their annual meetings at one time or another. We've done quite a bit with bringing in professors to talk about artificial intelligence and how it might apply to their business, or data visualization tools, and look at how companies maybe in their sector are beginning to view data differently. Something that really engages them in some way to say, hey, look at these things that are going on in the community. I'm going to events. I'm doing my offsite meetings. I'm having these workshops where entrepreneurs and researchers are coming in to talk about the secret hidden goal here. And don't tell anybody on your show is to get them.
Your secret's safe with me.
It's got to be secret, John.
Yeah.
You don't want me to know. As we're manipulating these companies to get them to feel comfortable in the tech community, so that they'll bring us their problems. Because those innovation challenges around their problems, that's the oxygen for our entrepreneurs. Right. They have a market. They have funding. They have a problem to work on. These are three of the hardest things to come up with that are there. And so the more companies that we can get to participate, the better off it is for our entrepreneurs.
Yeah, because what companies are doing is not something that's just good for themselves, although it's very good for themselves, but it helps develop a ecosystem that they're going to need to rely on for years to come, right?
That's exactly it. They can no longer get past it. I had a statistic, and I don't have the sheet around anymore to show you this, but it's an amazing one. 30 years ago, about 85% of innovation came out of corporates. Only about 15% came out of the startup community, right? Now it's exactly swapped. About 85% of innovation comes out of the startup community, only about 15% from corporates. And so in some regards, they don't have a choice. I mean, they need to find a way to come into the tech community to access this type of things, right? We're not having to tell them that they have an innovation issue. They know they have an innovation issue.
Sure.
The question is, how do we get them into a form that's actually useful for us, right, in the tech community? And I think a lot of these, using the labs and some of the things we talk about are great ways to start.
Now, Brock, it strikes me that all of us have what people think, what we do, and then what people think we do. And it strikes me that you're as much not just an innovation injector into larger companies, but you really help them navigate the organizational issues that are involved with that. And those are people issues, they're HR issues, they're organizational development issues that don't have anything to do with technology, right?
It is.
Yeah.
So call it the internal wiring.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times, what the companies are doing on the outside is a reflection of what's happening on the inside, right? Or what's missing. So if they can't do more than come to events, or if they can't start a project, it's typically a reflection of what's going on the inside. And so it's important when they decide to come into the tech community that I spend some time inside their organization to understand what's going on. To give you one example, we work with this great big logistics company, right? And they had an customer onboarding process that was 180 steps, 17 work streams, 180 steps to onboard a customer, right? Now, it was well documented, and they understood the process, and they identified that every single one of the steps was necessary. But when it comes to innovation, right, I mean, these are the types and kinds of internal barriers that prevent them from really creating the wiring to speed things up internally, which translates into being able to do things more nimbly out in there. And so some continuous improvement to help companies on the inside with these processes are much needed,
Sure, absolutely. So we're wrapping up here. Now I want you to have your opportunity to get the message out to corporates and folks inside corporations here, both locally and around this in this region, to come and be part of the tech community. What's your message?
So they all need to come out and play. I mean, there is an obligation here, I think, that corporates have. They certainly have the problems that people want to work on. There are things to do for every budget. And it doesn't matter how busy the executives are. There's always a bit of time to come on out. There's people like myself in the community that want to be your brand ambassador and want to find ways to help do this innovation and everything else. But they need to take a first step and to come on out and see that it's not that scary and whatnot. I always tell people, even when you don't have a budget internally this year for innovation, you always have the ability to knowledge build and begin to come out and learn about the resources, learn about the universities, learn about our labs. There's always ways to sponsor. I mean, we're constantly looking for sponsors for these events, John, right? I mean, it's even the pizza night on Thursday is important,
right?
And it's an opportunity for a company to come and be part of it. In fact, we were doing down with Tech Square Labs a couple of years ago. There was a statistic that they had down there that of the top graduates, right, the best one always has a job, and the next 2 or 3 always find stuff to do out of town. And if you really wanted to have a top recruit, you have to convince them that you're innovative, right? And one way to do that is to be in the tech community and be present, and it'll help you hire smarter people because they'll see you as a company that they want to work for. And so there's a lot of benefits. So it helps me if you come out and I don't have to coax you out. But once you come out, there's a lot of things that companies can do that aren't budget busters. Even on a company that has to watch every penny, that is incredibly beneficial to it. Just being a mentor. I mean, right. The value of having a CEO or a VP sit down with a startup at a lunch meeting and share with them a bit about their industry,
Sure. So every one of these companies, they're at a different spot and they've got different ways to connect, and the only way they can know how to connect for them is to talk to you. So tell them how they can get in touch with you.
That's it. Great. So I'm in Atlanta, and I'm here every day. Working out of the Innovation Labs. I work out of Atlanta Tech Park right now. You can look up their website, atlantatechpark.com. My company is Gr8BigIdeas, Gr8BigIdeas, and I focus just working with corporates and helping them connect. I'd welcome any sort of connection, call, email. You can find me on the website. You can send me a message at Brock@Gr8BigIdeas.com, but I'm easily found. And I can help companies really understand what it is they're trying to do and help plug them into what's going on in our community here. Awesome.
Brock, great to have you with us.
Excellent. Thanks, John, as always.
Yeah, thank you. Folks, today you're connected more than ever, whether it's your friends, your family, or your life. Renaissance understands how you bank, offering you mobile banking services that you need. But they also know that sometimes you need to speak to real people with real answers and not dial a 1-800 number. And that's why they've got more than 190 convenient locations throughout the South ready to serve you. For more information, go to renaissancebank.com. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. Just a reminder, we do this show every Thursday, live at 11:30, and sometimes we do special shows. But we love following tech leaders in and around the Alpharetta, North Fulton area. So if you miss any of our live shows, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. We're on all of them. So check us out. You can also go online to northfultonbusinessradio.com. Find us there as well. Check us out on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, the usual spots, North Fulton BRX. So for my guest, Brock Kolls, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Alpharetta Tech Talk.